Good afternoon. If I'm not mistaken, this is communication number 19 or 20, so I won't be offended if you look a little bit tired, maybe bored this afternoon. I'll try to grasp your attention. I'm going to cheat a little bit and show a movie if technology cooperates. And my talk is about the World Bank strategy. Every 10 years, we put forward a strategy which aims to guide our work in the future for the next 10 years. The World Bank is a major player in the world of education. People, when they think about the World Bank, they think about infrastructure, maybe the private sector, and tend to forget that we are probably one of the biggest supporter of education in the world, with about $5 billion in commitment in the year ending June 30, 2010. This strategy starts by consultation, and we consulted in about 100 countries. We were here with my colleague Jeffrey Waite, who is here, I think, a year ago to consult with the Moroccans about the strategy, and all these consultations led to what I'm going to present today. First, let me start by the good news. This is the title of the strategy. The good news is that schooling has continued to increase in low-income countries in the past decade. So we are putting more students in schools, and they are staying longer. So the completion rate, which is one of the most important indicators in education development, is not how many schools or how many students in schools, but how long they stay in school. Do they complete enough years of schooling to be literate? And we have been doing quite well. And same thing for gender equality in schooling, where in most countries in the world this has been improving a lot. But success has bred new challenges, and this is what the strategy is about. What are these new challenges? First, enrollment does not always mean learning, and this is why the title of our strategy is Learning for All. If you remember, before we used to say education for all, and for us it has a completely different meaning. Learning is important because we are finding out that many of grade 8 students, which are about 14 years old, lack some basic knowledge in numbers, decimal operation, basic graphs. And you see here a chart that shows in dark green the amount of learning, or what the proportion of students that know these basic things in this very critical age. And then in light green, those students that don't have this basic knowledge. And unfortunately, many African countries, as you can see here, are in the right part of the graph. And the amount of learning is really dismal in some of these countries. Interestingly enough, some of these countries are very rich and are putting huge amount of resources. Look at Qatar, look at Saudi Arabia, where they are. So it's not all about resources, that some tend to think. Resources help, of course, but they don't provide the boost that we think they do. So what does it mean people don't learn? And I took an example of 14 years old, but if I go to grade 5 and 4 and 5, this is one of the questions that students are given in PISA. A piece of rope of 204 centimeters long is cut into 4 equal pieces. Which of these gives the length of each piece in centimeters? And 4 operations are proposed. Do you divide 204 by 4? Do you multiply 204 by 4? Or is it 204 minus 4? Is it 204 divided by 4? Of course, you know that it's answer D. More than 50% of the Tunisian students didn't know the answer and got it wrong. And you know that the Tunisian education system is not the worst in Africa. So we have a big problem on our hands. We are putting more students in schools, but they are not learning. And we know that this is a problem, because if they are not learning, in the future they will have many problems: less healthy, less innovative, less able to find a job, they will make less money, they contribute less to their community, have less knowledge to pass to their children. But if they learn, if we manage to make them learn, we know that learning contributes to growth. This is a very important study which was completed about a year ago by a very respectable researcher, and it shows that there is a very strong correlation between not the human capital measured in number of years or average number of years of education in the population, but the scores, the quality of education measured by how much students learn through the participation of international assessment. And this is, for me, changes the whole concept of education, because economists, and there are probably a few in this room, are familiar with the measure of human capital, which is the average number of years of education in the population. That doesn't mean much. What means a lot is how much students learn. So how can we make them learn better? How can we achieve this learning for all? How can we make it a reality? Here I would like to go to the movie, and I solicit our colleagues in the technology to pass this movie. Can we? On peut passer le film? Non, ça c'est pas le film. On peut? Non? Le film est sur un fichier que... Ah. Bon. Il n'y a pas de film. Ou peut-être. Ok, peu importe, désolé. Le film, ce sera pour une autre fois, mais c'est un petit film qui... I switch back to English, sorry for... It's a small movie that says that it's very simple. There are three things that we should keep in mind. First is invest early. Second, invest smartly. Third, invest for all. I will not have many problem explaining to you what we mean by invest early and invest for all. However, investing smartly may be a little bit more delicate, so I will insist on this part. Investing early, human capital investment early in life is very important. This is coming from education economists, but it's coming from neuroscience also. And what they are saying is that if you try to catch up later, it will cost you more. And this is a very interesting curve. I hope many of you at least know this. It says the return for every dollar invested. When it's invested early, the earlier it's invested, the higher the return, and it's very high. But with time and with age, the investment for every dollar will decline and will become very small in later phases of life. It's interesting because although this has been hammered on us by scientists, many countries are not investing in early childhood development, in 0 to 3 or 3 to 6. I know the average in Africa, and I heard it this morning, is about 12% of children have a chance of some early childhood development. You know that the reasons usually have to do with the fact that it's always difficult to scale up the interesting models that we see sometimes working very well on a small scale. There are also problems of coordination. Early childhood education, contrary to basic or secondary education, is usually a shared responsibility between education, health, and social affairs. And in fact, it's not only about education, it's about also nutrition, it's about health, it's about a lot of things that support the development of the child. Now, invest smartly, and I'm going to say a few more words about it, and I hope I convinced you about investing early is very important. Invest smartly means that we need to think beyond inputs. When we want to focus about learning, in fact, inputs becomes almost irrelevant because there is no direct relationship between inputs and outcomes, which is learning. As I said earlier, some countries spend a lot and get very little, and the contrary exists also. We need to strengthen education systems, and here the important word is system. What is an education system? I'm going to come back to it later. We need to allocate resources efficiently and smartly, develop a knowledge base for effective policy making. Education is very complex and becoming increasingly complex, so knowledge here is a very important word. We don't have enough knowledge. We don't know what works. If you ask the researcher, and there are some studies that have been released recently, they try to look everywhere what we found through research, what intervention lead to the most important results. And finally, we can say much about what works and what doesn't work. And I know many will disagree on that, but I can send you to some interesting findings that were recently published. So let me start by the basic. How can we define first an education system? Again, I choose a triangle like some did earlier. An education system is a group of actors, and there is a central and local governments. There are community, households, students, and there are schools, public, private, etc. And on the side, we have the economy and the national and international labor market. A system is the relationship that holds these partners together. And these are a relation of power, accountability, financing, everything that holds them together and makes them a system. That's what we need to have in mind, and not an individual intervention like teacher training, for example. And we think it's a panacea. Training teacher will make them a good teacher. No, that's not true. It helps, but we need to think about remuneration of teachers. We need to think about the initial recruitment of teachers. How do we make them motivated? How do we make them supported by strong leadership at schools? And someone talked about it this morning. So there are many policies, and most of them is about governance, accountability, financing, autonomy also are very important notions that make a system work. So think about the domains of policy. If you are in the shoes of a Minister of Education, you will have to deal about teacher policy, you need learning assessment, you need monitoring of information, quality assurance, financial allocation, and other things. So how do we interlock all this together, all these policy domains? How do we make them work well together? There is no simple recipe, but this shows you why we have been not so successful. I'm not saying failing, but it's not going as fast as we expected in Africa, particularly because it's complex. If we focus on only one or two or three of these domains and forget about the others, it will not work. And if we have policy domains that are not locked together, that are not in synergy with each other, we will have problems.